out here. So we have 3 panelists with us today to talk about what do businesses mean when they say they want more creative employees. We think we know, but we all have different ideas of that, right? So we thought, what better time than today to hear from some of our business leaders in the community about what they mean by creativity. I have a brief intro here, some interesting stats about why creativity is so important. So according to the IBM 2010 Global CEO Study, surveyed 1,500 CEOs from 60 countries and 33 industries worldwide. CEOs believe that more than rigor, management discipline, integrity, I might disagree with that one, or even vision, successfully navigating an increasing complex world requires creativity. And a 2012 Adobe study on creativity shows 8 in 10 people feel that unlocking creativity is critical to economic growth, and nearly 2/3 of respondents feel that creativity is valuable to society, yet a striking minority of them, only 1 in 4 people, believe they are living up to their own creative potential. Just 1 in 4. So we have a lot of unlocking to do there. And I'm sure many of you have heard of Daniel Pink. He is a big, famous, renowned author these days. He had his 2005 book, A Whole New Mind, said that we are living in the age of creativity, which I thought was interesting because I've heard so much about us living in the age of the knowledge economy. But apparently, we've come out of that. That first there was the agricultural age, and then the industrial age, and we had, of course, the information age with the knowledge workers. And now we're in the conceptual age with the creators and the empathizers. So I thought that was pretty interesting, that here we are. So never a better moment than right now to have this conference today. So with that, I'd like to introduce, we have Mark Kittrell, and we have Therese Kuster. Thank you. I'm sorry. And then we have Elliott, and each of them are going to introduce themselves, and then each of them will provide their remarks on what they mean by creative employees, what they're looking for in creativity with employees. So, Mark, if you want to introduce yourself first.
Sure. I sat down here on this end because I thought I was going to be last. So I see we're going to do things in an unorthodox way. I know, in a creative way. We're going to start out that way. Thank you very much. My name is Mark Kittrell, and I guess I would tell you that I am a hometown boy and a UNI alum, and I like to say one of the original patron saints of non-traditional students here in UNI. It took me 9 years actually to get through UNI, and that wasn't because there was a lot of time off. It was just because I sort of had to find my way and work and try out a variety of different majors here. I was a musician and everything else, and ended up graduating in technology. I was a physics major here, so I spent the last 30 years of my career in the private sector as an entrepreneur, primarily. Have studied and spent a lot of time starting companies. Several of them have been successful. I've been blessed in that regard. And I think the other passion that I would tell you that I have is that I've spent an awful lot of time working in communities and certainly trying to improve our community and our state. I've spent a lot of time in economic development and working with folks in that area. I have recently taken a job in Des Moines as the president of the Iowa Innovation Corporation, which is really chartered with trying to find creativity and grow important targeted industries inside of the state. IT, manufacturing, and biosciences are a couple of those key areas. So So I would just tell you that I will start out in a theme that I'll be using in my comments, and I'll turn it over to several of my other panelists here. But a theme that I will say is, I think that creativity is a word that Iowans struggle with. There are a lot of sort of things that Iowans self-identify with, and creativity would not be naturally one of those words that I think Iowans think of themselves as being as creative. I'll say also that I think that is, if you use words that are synonymous with creativity, if you ask people, for example, are they good problem solvers, for example, I think that Iowans would naturally say, absolutely, we solve problems very well. Are we good communicators and collaborators? I think most Iowans would say we get along with virtually everyone. We're hardworking and we're accustomed to getting things done. So I think a lot of the components are there to build from within Iowans, but I think we sort of have to get our minds around a little bit of this concept of creativity. So I look forward to spending time with you all and discussing that.
My name is Therese Kuster, and I graduated from UNI in 2012 with a degree in public relations. And one of the best things that I took with me out of my experience at UNI was being in the entrepreneurial program in the Student Business Incubator. In 2010, which would have been my junior year, I started a business with a partner called SEO Solutions, and so we set forth working on online marketing in the things that we had learned working for another student entrepreneur. So that business then merged to become another business called TargetClick Marketing, which then sold to become a part of Mud Advertising here in Cedar Falls. So we now exist as TargetClick powered by Mud Advertising. I think that I would have to echo what has already been said about creativity, meaning much more than just being a painter or doing great graphic design. I think it means creativity in getting things done and accomplishing things. And I hope that I'm able to contribute today based on the creativity that it takes to be a full-time student and a full-time student entrepreneur at the same time, and the creativity that it takes to figure out how to convince all these people that work with you that you know what you're doing even though you haven't even graduated college yet. So I hope that I can provide a little insight that way and echo the points of creativity meaning much more than what we think of when we initially hear that word. So thank you for having me today.
All right, Nick Elliott. I am also a UNI grad, and I had an excuse of why it took me 6 years to get through college, but since Mark took 8 or 9, I figure I'm okay. I graduated from UNI in 98, had a chance to work here in the Cedar Valley for a few years, ended up down in Cedar Rapids and worked for a staffing company, so I did that for about 4 years. And so that's why I'm going to bring some of that experience here to the conversation today about creativity and maybe what employers might be looking for. I did relocate to Cleveland, Ohio for a few years before I had the opportunity to come back and start working with DISTek integration in 2005. So the business development manager for DISTek, get involved in a lot of our hiring activities there. I started my own business here in Waterloo a couple of years later. It's a tax business that my wife and I run. Mostly my wife. I don't get too involved in it. She pulls most of that. But certainly creativity plays a big role from the people we hire, from the way we advertise, from the way we market our businesses, from the way we try and differentiate ourselves, from the way that we try and gain a competitive edge against other companies that are providing similar types of services. There's so much competition in such a global market now that we really have to do things to differentiate ourselves and set ourselves apart. And like we've already kind of touched on a little bit, I think in Iowa we've got this incredible work ethic. We've got really smart people who can do great things, but we don't generally label ourselves as creative people, even though I would certainly beg to differ. So yeah, excited to be here, looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think across all three, you heard that there is kind of this language barrier with the word creativity, right? So it's this nomenclature issue of like, people don't necessarily identify themselves as creative. So can I take a quick poll, and if you could raise your hands in the audience, those who think that they are creative. Pretty good, you beat the 1 in 4 average. I was hearing Mark talk about Iowans don't necessarily identify themselves as creative. And I think Nick also said something similar, and so sometimes that language of the word creative or creativity to people means artistic, right? So this is really what this session is about today, is, well, what does creativity mean to businesses? So that was really interesting to hear that you really all spoke to that. So Mark, if you want to go ahead and get started with, you gave us a little bit of an intro into what you see that businesses think creativity means. So if you would like to expand on that.
Yeah, sure, happy to do so. Thank you very much. Let me just start out a little bit and tell you that if you sat in on the prior session, it was an excellent one, and there was a lot of discussion about communities within the state, how Iowa as a more rural or at least a state with a number of smaller communities really finds its way in the global and creative economy that's really being created. And I thought there were some really excellent points that were being made. I thought maybe what I might be able to do is tell you that within the state, and I think it sort of intuitively makes sense, we can't be everything to everyone, and so we've really made a lot of research. We've taken a lot of steps. We've had a lot of discussions over the last probably 15 or 20 years, and we've really come up with what people would call the targeted industries, the things that here in this state we are really good at and we really are looking at continuing to expand. And those industries have broken down basically into manufacturing, into biosciences, and then information technology are the three current targeted industries that are there. And maybe if I can, let me just put a little bit of a framework around each of those and talk a little bit about creativity and maybe how that may play in more of an Iowa way in each one of those sectors. You might be surprised, I certainly was over the last year or so, as I really have gotten more into the statewide look at things, to find out that manufacturing is actually the largest thing that we do inside of the state of Iowa. And I think that sort of is counterintuitive because you drive around and you see an awful lot of soybean fields and cornfields, and you sort of get the sense, in this patchwork quilt of the state that we live in, that agriculture is the number one thing that we do. But in terms of actual dollars and actual employment, manufacturing, we build things here. And I think there's a long tradition of having built things here. The sense that people have of manufacturing, and I think it's one that is an antiquated one and really needs a creative sort of a facelift that goes along with it, is manufacturing is a relatively dirty, relatively boring, relatively low-tech sort of a place where, people who are relatively uneducated work, and I can tell you in every one of those cases that's not the case. The manufacturers that are being successful in the global economy are people that have a lot of very highly technical people working on. I've been in meetings recently where people are talking about collaborative robots, virtual reality modeling, and sort of process re-engineering through all sorts of calculus that I've forgotten because it's been a long time since I was at UNI taking calculus classes. But I would tell you there's an awful lot of problem solving, there's an awful lot of technology, and there's an awful lot of creativity that's required in manufacturing. And that's particularly the case when we're trying to find new creative ways of building products to be able to bring them back. There's an awful lot of, even at the federal level, interest in making things in America. I think there's a general acceptance of the fact that the middle class is very much wound around this notion of making things, that we really got to be able to do that. So finding creative ways of manufacturing and bringing things and building things back here in the state of Iowa is a very large component, and this kind of creative approach is really important for it. I would also tell you that, in just sort of looking at the problem of how to increase productivity of people in manufacturing, being able to do that better means that manufacturers can be more efficient and pay more and wages go up. And that's another sort of large problem that the state has, is we really not only want to create more jobs, but we want to create good, high-paying jobs. And so, labor and things that go along with it. This is a similar sort of a situation. Biosciences is really the area of how do we grow an awful lot of things here, but how do we retain more of the value of the products that are there? You can drive around not very far and find an awful lot of biodiesel and ethanol plants sitting on the end of gravel roads that weren't there a decade ago. Those are creative things that people have come up with to power cars and deal with some of the energy issues that we're dealing with. Absolutely has raised billions of dollars into the state into investment, and I think there's an awful lot of interest in looking at other new ways where maybe what biochemicals or making things that are currently made more out of petroleum, out of some of the things that we grow and that are renewable. A lot of creativity that's going to be required in that area as well. Last area, and I'll speak to real quickly because I think it's the most obvious to folks, is in IT. I think I heard the stat the other day, there's something approaching 1 million apps out on phones these days, which is a staggering number for a guy who's been in the computer business for an awfully long time. I'm also really thrilled that UNI has an app lab now. And, there's a lot of student and entrepreneurial interest in creating apps and figuring out how to, do things in IT. It's very, very easy to be an entrepreneur in IT. It takes not a lot, but creativity and, frankly, determination and hard work to be able to do that. So all three of those areas really have a great opportunity and, frankly, great need in Iowa.
I want to turn this a little bit. I love the perspective of what's going on in Iowa. I want to talk for a minute about what's going on in this room. So I'm curious, more audience participation, how many people in this room are current students? Good. And how many people are students and or job seekers in, say, the next 6 months? Either now or will be. Not very many students are active job seekers, you guys. I would suggest that's where we start to focus. I'm teasing really, but I'm sure you will be. If you're a student now, I'm sure in the next couple of years, whether it's a full-time, part-time internship, whatever it is, job hunting is something that's probably going to be a part of our lives for a long time. And I remember, I've been out of school a year and a half, so I remember in school always hearing, your job hasn't even been invented yet, or hearing that your mom or dad had the same job or worked for the same place their whole career, and you'll probably have 7 or 9 or whatever the average number is now. So whether you're job seeking now or you will be soon, I think having to be creative is something that will always be something that you have to be thinking about in terms of making yourself a qualified employee or internship candidate or whatever it may be. So speaking to the point that your job hasn't been invented yet, I think that we can think of that on multiple scales. Maybe your job that hasn't been invented yet is to improve those Amazon delivery drones that we just heard about, in the past couple of days, or any of the things previously mentioned. But maybe your job that hasn't been created yet is because no one has thought of those particular services going together for you to do. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because at TargetClick we just made a job offer last week to someone to be a digital content specialist, which we made up. Because we need a person who can do social media, reputation management, and copywriting, and do it in a strategic way that contributes to overall online marketing. So even though it's not necessarily a consumer-changing thing like an Amazon drone, that is a new job that, for us, hadn't been invented yet. Those services sure exist, but without recognizing the need for that particular position, it's something that we have just created. So I think that is a point to consider, and from our perspective at least, we put a lot of responsibility on our employees to create their own jobs, and in order to create your own job, you have to be creative. And so by that, I mean, we've had someone come in as an intern in one field in technical online marketing and see, hey, I see what those guys are doing over there. Can I have this hybrid job that does both? And we say, well, prove that you can do it. Prove that we can't live without that. So I think you have to be a creative person to do that, creative in problem solving and solution-oriented things. So I guess I just want to bring to light to the people in this room, statewide, or, you know, I know none of you are leaving the state upon graduation. You're all going to stay probably here in the Cedar Valley. You know, wherever you may end up, I think that is important for everyone in the room to consider that, you know, creativity from an employer's perspectives can mean a lot of different things, and I say that from experience because it means a lot of different things in our business, which is just down the road, and once existed on this very campus. So, just a little perspective I wanted to bring to the discussion.
Yeah, I think that's, you make some great points, and so you, Mark. And, you know, I think kind of where my take will be kind of a combination of you two, because, you know, I've been doing sales here in Iowa for the last, 12 years in a couple different occupations, and I've seen a lot of the manufacturing. I've had a chance to go on a lot of the tours. I head up our local CASA group, which is computer and software automation, so I get the chance to go out and visit a lot of businesses and tour and kind of see how they're utilizing technology and incorporating it in. And they've got the robots and all the smart things, but it still comes down to the ideas that people have. And it's not just, they're not just leaning on senior management. They're not, you know, these people that are in these manufacturing jobs, they're not just sitting there in the break room waiting for management to tell them what to do for the second half of their day. I mean, they're actively engaged in what they're doing. They're bringing up ideas. They've got ideas on better workflow, the things they can do in their stations, or ways to more efficiently do their job, or to increase productivity. I mean, I certainly see a lot of that when I'm going out on these different tours and having the opportunity to meet different people, different companies, and seeing how they're incorporating technology into their workplace, whether it's a manufacturing job or, you know, more even like in an office type setting. You know, I think it's really been impressive to me to see how much we've evolved in the academic world in terms of the increased use of technology and the increased emphasis on creativity. I know we hired an engineer at DISTek. He graduated college from in Ames, Iowa State, in '06. And so he works for us now, and he's actually a team lead that we have. So he's done quite well. And I was telling him that, you know, my son's high school here at Cedar Falls High School, they've got, you know, CNC machines, and they've got 3D printers, and they're building apps for his first robotics team, and he understands how to do CAD design. And he was just blown away, just couldn't believe it. You know, when he was in high school, they never even talked about this sort of technology. You know, what opportunities are out there for people. You know, I think now there's groups, there's organizations, there's ways to get involved. I personally have been a first Lego League coach for the last 5-6 years now. And so I love working with the kids, and I work with kids that are from 4th grade to 6th grade at South Elementary, local elementary school here. And so and just seeing the way that these kids attack different problems, the creativity they use, the camaraderie, what they learn how to work in teamwork. I mean, these kids are going to be so much further ahead than what I know I was when I graduated high school, and I'm not that old, despite what some people think. So it's awesome to me to see how prepared our young people are coming out of high school, entering into college, and ultimately coming out of college. Because I think it makes a big impact into, Mark, what you were talking about with manufacturing, and Therese, what you were talking about, you know, in the workplace and creativity. Because, you know, I know, you know, from a staffing side, you know, we look, you know, so say I'm looking for an electrical engineer, and I've got 3 people that all have similar resumes. Well, what can they do to differentiate themselves? Maybe they have a patent. Maybe they've been in a product. Maybe they've been involved with some of these organizations. I mean, you've got to do things to set you apart, because, I mean, it is, like I said in my intro, it is a global market. I mean, we can, You know, there's a lot of services you can get. You know, I can have someone work remotely for us in Southern California that's got the qualifications, because all she needs to work with us is a high-speed internet access. That's mostly it. And a phone. You know, so people can really work anywhere. So you got to realize when you're competing in the job market, particularly in a technical field, you've got to do things to set yourself apart because there's so much competition. And you know, and people that do that do very, very well. And so that's kind of my little spin on it. And there's lots of local things. You may not realize how many local opportunities there are. This Saturday, we're having our first Lego League competition. So there's going to be hundreds of kids there, tons of mentors, local business people, engineering folks are going to be there supporting the kids, getting involved in those types of activities. There's different groups. There's a Facebook page called Makers, where people that invent different ideas or have ideas, they buy these construction kits that go on there, and you know, they post ideas and they get together and do different activities. So the organization's involved with. So yeah, I'm kind of coming at this from a technology standpoint, just because that's what I've been mostly involved in. But I certainly see it in a lot of different industries, manufacturing, marketing, advertising, those types of things.
Thank you. Excuse me. Well, I'm going to, since we have 3 highly creative individuals on our panel today, I'm going to mix things up a little bit and put you all on the spot. And I'm going to ask each of you to come up with 3 terms or sentences about what you think creativity is. Because for us to prepare our students to be creative and to go out and work to full their productive capacity in your enterprises, we need to know how you view creativity. So now you have, and the trick is you have to each come up with something different. So I'm hoping it builds, and since I know Mark personally and know how creative he is, he will get to go last this time. So he will have the most difficult task. So let's get it started.
Oh boy.
Are you doing all 3 minutes? You start with
I think we should start with
That's a good idea.
So as you probably guessed, so when I think of creativity, I come at it from the perspective of problem solving. Because we're a service provider, because a lot of companies in Iowa tend to, they're not manufacturing or growing, they tend to fall in this service provider industry, as is typical throughout the U.S. When I think of creativity in the workforce, what I'm looking for, the people I interview, what I'm looking at is their problem solving abilities. I want people that are able to look at a situation, and when I ask them for what's the best tablet to use for this particular challenge that I have, I want them to come back to me and say, well, why do you want to use a tablet? A tablet is not the best use for this. What you really need to be using is some other device that they may know of. So when you ask for a kind of a pointed solution to a problem, I want them to be able to step outside, take a step back and look at it and say, okay, well, I know what he's asking for, but if I were doing this on my own, if I had that, if I was the entrepreneur, if I was writing the checks, if I'm a part owner in the company that I'm working for, how would I handle this situation? And so from a creativity standpoint, that's what I'm looking for. When I talk to people, when I interview people, I'm asking them those questions and trying to uncover, how do they go about, their problem solving skills. So that's one of the things that I'm looking for.
Good. I agree with that. I look for the same thing. One of the, phrases that I want to bring is communicate creatively. Because I work in a client-facing field, and more specifically, a lot of our clients are in the automotive space, which means just demographically, a significant portion of them are 45 to 50-year-old white males. And that's just their demographic, and them being in the automotive industry, which is very used to instant gratification. And all clients are like that. It's just not this industry, but you have to get creative with the way that you give them answers to questions. You also have to be careful because you can't ever guarantee results in advertising and marketing. You can guarantee what you'll deliver. You can guarantee it will be done on time, but you can't guarantee how many cars are going to sell off of it. So you have to get creative in the way that you're going to provide them a response that answers the question. It does not mislead them, but makes them feel satisfied and good about the relationship that you have with them.
When you go to UNI, you always have to know that there'll be a test question thrown in there somewhere. So I was prepared actually for this one. So just kidding. The prior two answers were, I thought, excellent, and actually I have notes on both of those. The third one that I would tell you is, and I kind of continue to try and put this in words that Iowans identify with, I just call it simply hard work. And I think most Iowans naturally understand and sort of identify with, we work hard. I mean, that's something that we're not afraid of here in the state, and I think it's a wonderful thing. The statistics that are interesting is 90%, I think, of Iowans were self-employed 100 years or so ago. It was a phenomenal number of people, and they were comfortable in being in that role where they did literally everything, and that the risks for their success or not for their success were really borne by themselves. So I think this sort of natural instinct that we have, in this natural sense of we work hard, is one that's there. I don't think that we all naturally think of ourselves as being creative workers. And the saying of work smart, don't work hard is, I think, an interesting one for us to sort of ponder and think about in terms of creativity, because that really is the essence of working smart. I probably have hired 500 people in my career or something, and I've always tried to ask a couple of questions as being one of those one or two questions that I thought I would give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to someone in an interview situation. And one of those questions, and I've sort of worked on it for a long time, was, do you feel like you're someone that likes to do new things every day, or are you someone who really likes to do things very well each day? And that's a balanced question, and I think it's one that people sort of self-identify one way or the other. There are a lot of people who are very comfortable, and I'm proud of what I do, and I want to do it perfectly, and I want to do it better every day, and I think there's room for that. That's creativity in the form. I think there's an awful lot of other people who say, you know what, boy, I did that yesterday, and that's boring as heck. I would sure like to do something different today. I would really like to help our company do something different, or our customers succeed in a different way, and that's creativity. So I would tell you that this whole notion of hard work is, I think, rolled up very, very closely in working smart and creativity.
We'll talk about a test question. That was very thought-provoking, that interview question, as well as what you were looking for in terms of response to one of your interview questions. I was very intrigued by that. So we're going to go back down the row if you're all ready for round two, and we'll keep going with Nick first.
I thought you were going to start at that and break that.
Thanks for that.
No, so one of the other things that I talk to people about, or one of my favorite sayings at work, and I think people are maybe a little tired of hearing it, but I tell them everyone's in sales. And what I mean by that is every one of our people, they have interactions with our key stakeholders, whether it's our customers, whether it's people on their team that they lean on, whether it's your management, if you're trying to complete a task or something like that maybe was assigned to you. But ultimately, you're always selling yourself. So, I like to just encourage everyone to think like they're in sales, and kind of take that level of ownership of their project, of their work, of what they're doing, of their completed deliverable. Is what they're doing something that they're proud of, something that they want to, they can stand behind, and they want to show off to others. Is it something that they would want to stand in front of a group, you know, like you folks, and talk to them about, you know, something that they've accomplished and put together? And so I think if they start thinking like that they are in sales and that they're going to have to present on this, they're going to have to share their experience with others, you know, I think that's a really good way to kind of help take that level of ownership. And we'll kind of also, or it definitely will also encourage them to incorporate creativity into their design. And so that's one of my little phrases that I like to use that I think helps bring out the creative nature in others.
All right, my second phrase, I guess, is living in the gray. And anybody who knows me would laugh that I even say that because it's one of my own greatest personal challenges to live in the gray. But I think creativity does mean living in the gray. By that I mean not everything is black and white. Not everything is right or wrong. Not everything is good or bad. And I feel I can speak well to this one because it has been a constant challenge through probably my whole life. But I think it makes you a more creative person if you live in the gray, because one thing that we encounter a lot in our field, being that we're first a new company, second that we have a very young staff, both in terms of experience and chronological age, you know, bringing clients into the digital marketing age when they've never been there before. One thing that we find a lot is that you have to find a solution when there is no right answer. None of your answers are right. Maybe that means none of your answers are wrong. I don't know. I can't tell you that, but that's what living in the gray is. And if you accept that, if you embrace it, or at least try, I think it makes you much more creative as a person and as an employee. That can be very valuable.
Excellent. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to keep that theme going just a little bit. That's a fascinating one. I've spent most of my career in entrepreneurship or in small companies, things that I started or was involved with partners and started. And this notion of the gray is one that is a constant. And I guess I would tell you, I've done a lot of studies on sort of how people can deal with that sort of gray and the ambiguity, I think, that sort of is there along with it. Sometimes that's really, really difficult for people. If you are a perfectionist, and I certainly would admit to being a perfectionist, I'm someone who is always trying to make things black or white, I think has been said here. But, you know, you've got to be comfortable with you can't change the world, and you can't change it all at one time. This ambiguity, and there is a certain sense of things will get done, they will get done in their own time. You will have to figure out how to get them done and feel good about what you haven't gotten done, are all things that sort of roll into creativity and entrepreneurship that I think you need to deal with. One of my great sort of revelations in 30 years of being in a small company is you sort of by definition realize if you're in a growing company, you never will have enough time. I mean, that's by definition a growing company in that sort of situation. So the question really comes down to if you can't live in the gray and the ambiguity, how do you go home at night and ever turn it off or feel good about what you've accomplished during the day? How do you not let the creativity that propels you during the day not continue all the way through the evening time and wear you out? And what I've found is, and I love the notion of it, is you really have to find a way to prioritize things and say, you know what, today if I get one really important thing done, I should feel good about it. I should feel like I've put my best energy towards that. I've put my most creative thoughts, I've put the best that I have into that one important thing. You should go home at night and feel like I did something good today. And I think, you know, being able to do that and pick yourself up the next day and the next day after that and the next day after that is really key to being creative and doing it for the long haul. Tom Edison is famous for saying creativity, I think, is, in his words, 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And boy, he's probably got on, if anything, overstating that it is a lot of hard work.
It's interesting that you say that. When I was studying up for this panel, and I've always kind of struggled with what is the difference between creativity and innovation, because I sort of think of them as synonymous. There was a site that really described it as like the creativity was the inspiration, the innovation then was the perspiration, was the actual execution of the creativity. And so it's kind of a pipeline of creativity and innovation for the economy. So that was kind of interesting. And living in the gray, my goodness, the need to be adaptable, creativity is really about being adaptable and flexible in this day and age and rolling with things from a day-to-day basis. And so excellent contributions, thank you. We have just, it looks like 5 more minutes left. So if you could each go down, well, actually, you know what? Never mind. I'd like to ask questions. Ask questions of the audience. Do you all have any questions for our panelists? Oh, I know. I always have to think a little bit. Shashi must have something. Oh, Mary?
I'm just curious, within an environment or organizational culture, how much do you rely on somebody bringing that creativity with them when they get hired versus fostering that creativity in the kind of culture and environment that you have in your workplace?
Anyone in particular?
I have some thoughts on that. I think that's something that's really important in our business. We hire a lot of people or invite them in for internships when they've never had any training whatsoever in what we're asking them to do. We do SEO, search engine optimization, search engine marketing. A lot of it is technical online marketing stuff where they can maybe take one class in, but they certainly can't get a degree in it. So we expect them to come in with the foundation that we can then foster into growth in those skills. And I think the same is true in terms of the creativity. I would expect a person who's putting their best foot forward to try to demonstrate their creativity through problem solving and living in the gray and persistence and all of those things, even if creativity does not mean artistic in that setting. So I guess I would expect that a person comes in and demonstrates they have the foundation of creativity through those criteria that we've discussed, but I also think that we as employers have to take a lot of responsibility to support and empower and foster that while they're part of our team.
I absolutely echo that. I would also say there's an important risk-reward component that's implicit in building a culture where people are comfortable creating, because creating is risk. I mean, in several of the companies that I've had, one of them for a long time, we used to celebrate on Christmas parties what we call the crash discord, which was the biggest sort of thing that happened. It wasn't planned, maybe a creative side product, you might say, or whatever. You know, maybe it was a mistake, maybe it was an error, or whatever the case may be, but rather than, you know, making people feel like they were likely to be fired for taking a risk or, you know, or stepping forward in an empowered way, we celebrated it and said, well, it wasn't exactly the right answer on that, but that was okay. So I think, you know, that's a really important thing, is to celebrate failures, because they pick you up and, you know, propel you on to the next important thing. In terms of rewards, I think it's also critical, because I'm a big believer that if the company benefits from something and it's an idea that has really come from the rank and file staff or management or whatever the case may be, if that reward is there for the company, that reward should be shared all the way through the organization with the people that were involved in it. So I think you have to think about both of those, and those are top-notch questions.
Excellent responses. If you don't mind, I'd like to move on to another question and just tie in a little bit here what you both said. I heard from you both that environment really matters, that it's not just enough for us to develop creativity in our students. Actually, our students come to us already with a lot of creativity, and sometimes education drums it out of them, right? But that the environment that you create as employees and that we create here at the institution really matters. And that's something that I had read about, was how do you then create creative environments. Very interesting perspectives on that. Any more questions? Catherine.
Christy, could the panel, Nick, Therese, and Mark, please address what students here at the university should be doing now to become creative and innovative employees for the future?
All right. Well, we'll go down the road. So I'll start here, and we'll let the ringers come in and give you the big answer. So, I would say just get involved. Get involved in activities. Be involved in university. There's so many avenues where people can, express themselves creatively, inside the university and also outside the university. There's lots of organizations. I know that the Technology Association of Iowa has a meeting, once a month, here in town, and folks from Des Moines and a lot of our local industry leaders, we go there, we talk about different things we're seeing in the industry. It's a chance just to network, get involved, and get a chance to meet people. Take advantage of those things. They're free activities. In fact, sometimes they even feed you things. So, it's a good way to get your name out, get yourself out, get experience. You're going to meet, people like this out in the industry, and certainly it's going to give you a leg up when you're then, you're out there as a job seeker and you want to pull on your network a little bit. You and Mark are LinkedIn friends because you talk to him every, once a month on Thursday nights, and maybe Mark would say a few things for you here. Those things are important. Those connections are good. I mentioned earlier the Kuster group that I'm involved in. I'm on the planning committee for the AMC Engineering Conference. It's going to be held in May at Five Solar Brothers Center. So there's a plethora of things you can do, both in the university as well as outside the university. I'm not as familiar about some of the tools that are available to the university. I'll let you guys talk to that a little bit. But as far as what I see, just getting involved in other activities would be my suggestion.
I think that's a great suggestion, and I think I'll simplify it even further by just saying being aware. Being aware that this is what people are going to be expecting of you, being aware that creativity means a lot more than just artistic, and being aware that you need to figure out how to put your best foot forward in that space. I highly doubt that there are people in this room that are not at least one of the criteria of creative that we've discussed. So I think you have the basic qualifications already. You just have to be aware that you have to show and prove that to people. A good example is people coming to us looking for internships where they've had no other internship experience and no other student organization involvement experience. One candidate, for example, had worked at a restaurant as a waitress. There's actually two candidates in this story. One, neither had any involvement in student orgs or anything like that. No prior experience, both working in the restaurant industry. And one of the students was much less qualified because she just said she wanted to do it. She just worked there. That was it. She had no evidence of how she learned from that job, nothing. The other student showed us how she had to make that decision financially. That was her only way to get through college. And we respect that. But she was able to say, this is what I learned in that position. Managing all these things, turning over all these tables, these different goals that they set, whatever it is. So I think being aware that this is what people are going to be expecting from you in your interviews and on your cover letters and all of those things, and then just putting your best foot forward.
Once again, I'll follow along with a great set of answers that went before me. Couldn't agree more. I think what I would say that the university and students could probably do the best job in, I really believe in getting involved, and internships are a great way to get involved. I've been a proponent of that sort of experiential, learning for an awfully long time. I guess I would also say that it's very interesting to me, and I graduated in physics and clearly haven't spent my career in physics. I think there's a real tendency that when you have a major in college, you think when I, get out of college, I'm going to be a biologist or I'm going to be a mathematician or whatever the case may be. And you sort of don't naturally see where there is a place where you as a square peg can plug into within the community and within our state. And I think it's really important for you to be creative and to try on a number of these different sort of things, in internships or summer employment opportunities, or even, just in the networking that you can do in other ways. I think the bridge that has to go from the university into the community has been talked about a lot, and I can tell you it's a two-way bridge. So employers don't always know exactly how it is that they can come up here and ask for what they need help for. I think there's an awful lot of creativity that students have and possess. I have two 20-year-olds at home, and they have more creativity than I can even, put a rope around most of the time, and that's wonderful. Industry and employers need you, and you need to be creative in figuring out sort of where you can fit in and where you can build.
Well, thank you. I will just add just a few last thoughts myself on how you can better prepare yourselves for the creative economy, right? Is take advantage, they all mentioned these opportunities to get engaged, right? Get engaged in the life of the university, get engaged outside the university. So, and whether it's internships or service learning, doing some volunteer work, doing hands-on research at the institution, being in groups at the institution. One of the big things that we see in our office, I head up our Office of Research and Sponsored Programs at UNI, is that a lot of creativity comes out of collaboration. So the opportunity to work with others in groups, take advantage of your group projects that you're assigned, take advantage of the clubs that you can belong to, and really learn to develop that capacity for collaboration. We have an entrepreneurship class here at the institution, at least one, if not several, and that is not just reading, Catherine.
No,
Four. That's not just for business majors. In fact, Mary and Josh here in the room, but sometimes our least entrepreneurial people are business majors, having done one myself. And so take advantage of the entrepreneurship courses. You can learn a lot from that, and that will set you apart too, I think, when you do look for a job. There's never a better time to become an entrepreneur than when you are a student. So take advantage of the resources of our Student Business Incubator. If you don't know that exists, Catherine, raise your hands again. Catherine Koda-Uyar has that up, and she can certainly give you a card and follow up with you, because it's a great opportunity that Therese certainly spoke to and took advantage of while she was here at the university. When you graduate, you don't have a mortgage usually, or a marriage usually, and so there's a little bit more opportunity to become an entrepreneur than when you have to worry about the golden handcuffs and mortgages and things like that, right? Right, Mark?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, well, I would like to thank our panelists today for joining us. It was an excellent discussion.